Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One Soccer. I am your host for today, Josh Deming. I will be joined by Alex momentarily. He is just running a little bit behind, so before he gets here, we'll just talk with you guys about the Canadian Championship quarterfinal matchups. I got a nice graphic to put on the screen for you guys, and Alex and I will go through each matchup, give our thoughts, predictions, and chat with you guys. But until then, feel free to just ask some questions. And Armin started it off with the One Soccer account, or producer T did, one of the two. Which team will make it through to the Canadian Championship semifinals? Let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions on that. And I will get, because it is such a nice graphic that Canada Soccer shared, I will get it up on screen for you guys. So I'm covering it a little bit, but that's not bad. That's a nice graphic. I need to just adjust it a touch. But there we go. So there you have the matchups there on screen. In the quarterfinals, TSS Rovers Pacific. That should be a good one. I know Alex is going to that match. You got York versus the Whitecaps, Forge, Atletico Ottawa, and Toronto versus Montreal, which are a few pretty good, tasty matchups for this quarterfinals. And then, of course, onto the semis, you can see who will play who. So if it's Pacific or the Rovers who go through, they have York or Whitecaps. So could have a real BC side of the bracket over there, which could be a little bit dangerous. But Alex is just getting here now, so I will invite him in. Alex, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Pleased to join you. Excited for a Can Champ week.
Yeah, I really had fun the last time we did this stream. The chat was fantastic. So hopefully you guys are excited just to break down some of these matches, because again, I got the nice tasty graphic here, so you get to see the pathway onto the final. And yeah, there's a lot of storylines to focus on. I'm really excited to talk about Montreal and their turnaround, Alex, but I think we will start with the match that I know you're going to. That is TSS Rovers versus Pacific. So tell me a little bit about your adventures, how you're gonna get there, and let our audience know when exactly that time is, and then give me your thoughts on the match.
Yeah, I mean the beautiful part about Pacific FC is that I'm out here in Vancouver, so to get out there, either you're rich and fancy and you take the boat plane, but I love the
Nice.
ferry. I just like being on water, the nice hour and a half journey. Maybe get some white spot on the ferry. Just go outside, breathe the fresh air. Certainly, the Rovers are doing that. It's pretty fitting because they nicknamed themselves the Soccer Pirates. So this is a chance for them to go by boat. I'll have to hope I'm not on their ferry because they might take it over and commandeer the ship, make everyone walk the plank. But no, it's always a great ride. And I think what's cool is that a lot of fans of the Rovers will be making that same journey, and it should make for a very good crowd.
Now, the Rovers are obviously the fairy tale story so far. We talked a lot in the last round about cup sets. There was Vaughn in there, Laval, but at the end of the day, Rovers are the one who did the only cup set, I would say. Do you think that just the best strategy for them would just to be riding this no pressure? I mean, there's no pressure on them. The pressure is on Pacific. They're the home side. They're expected to go through. Do you think that just gives an advantage to Rovers, the fact that, they're playing with house money?
Yeah, I think it's something where the pressure is on Pacific. They're the better team. They're the team that's one of the best in the CPL. This is a team that's also, they felt the heat a little bit to start the season. All of a sudden, they dropped a couple games. They didn't, it took a late Manny Aparicio bit of magic to get past Vancouver FC against Calvary. They scraped through the penalty shootout. It was kind of just like, okay, well, Pacific isn't clicking at full gear. Then they hit that against Ottawa, and you go, okay, that's why everyone's been excited about Pacific. That's what they can do at their best. But they, for the most part, in the other games, it feels like they've always been a step or two away from their best. So the pressure now for them is to keep up what they showed against Ottawa, because I think that's a true reflection of their level. They're at home. They've been to the semifinals of this tournament before. This is a chance to get back there, potentially host another Ferryside derby. Say if the Whitecaps win, that's always a huge incentive. If not, if York wins, Pacific has a chance for revenge to the team they lost to last year in the Canadian Championship. Everything's laid out quite nicely for Pacific. Whereas the Rovers, look, they made history last round. They became that first League One team to make that upset, to get through. Now that at just this point, it's another round, the journey continues for them. Their Canadian Championship was hosting that crowd. It was just getting a chance to showcase the players. So the fact that they get 90 more minutes of that, they're already winning, and they have zero pressure. It's a win-win no matter what happens, which is huge because, hey, maybe on the pitch that gives them the freedom to go get another upset.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's such a fun story, and it was great to see like the Canadian soccer universe kind of have a understanding just how special this tournament is, and these cup sets are a big part of that. So we're gonna keep jumping around through questions here. We're gonna try to engage you guys in the chat as much as possible. So if you are with us, drop a like on today's stream and put in your questions. I'm gonna try to get around. I see Paul C all over here. So desperate to see Forge play at BMO, but I do want to hear another one. Can Forge make it to the finals once more? Your thoughts. So Alex, I'm going to throw it to you because I do have to cough here. So pardon me for a sec, but talk a little bit about that Forge and Atletico Ottawa match, which is going to be at Tim Hortons Field.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good chance for Forge. It's a chance where, they fancy themselves against anyone in the CPL. So I think that's a matchup that at home they believe they should win. I think, and it's understandable to say they're probably pretty clear favorites just given the form Ottawa has been in the CPL. So this is something where it's a big opportunity for Forge. I think it's a tough task in the next round just because they'd have to go on the road to Montreal or Toronto, and that's a different beast. Like last year they went to Montreal rotated and still handily beat Forge. TFC's been a bit, all over the map this year, but it's never easy to play at BMO Field. So it's something where that semifinal is going to be a true test. They're going to have to tap into those away days they had in CONCACAF Champions League back in the day where they've been to some tough environments. But look, just making the semifinals and going up against a Toronto or Montreal team, no matter who wins, is going to have the pressure, is going to be expected to go and make the final, beat a CPL team. This Forge team, that mentality they have, plus the fact that they have so many guys that have been there in those Aztecas, in middle of El Salvador, in CPL finals. They certainly have the mentality, and it's a talented team. So it's something where it's just the run might be a bit tough to the finals, but I'd certainly back Forge in a game like that. I think, amongst CPL teams, they would probably have the best shot of going into a TFC or a Montreal and heading out on, with something. So that's a credit to what Bobby Smyrniotis has built.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm glad you guys couldn't hear those coughs. They were going left, right, and center. But no, I 100% agree with you. If a CPL team is going to be the first one to ever win this tournament, you'd probably have to lean at Forge. Although, I think we argued this the first time that Pacific has the best route to the finals. But I did like this comment that said if you're a TSS Rovers, the potential to host the Caps at home has to be absolutely delicious. And that is definitely true. But I do want to skip. We're going to go to Vancouver and York last, actually. But Alex, I do want to move over to TFC and Montreal. Luke Carrier says, let's go. And can Montreal win this? And I think a lot of the fun conversations that we had in the last stream was about CF Montreal being very disappointing. I think at the time they started their season, I believe they were like I think they were at 1.1-6, but I think that they were like 1-4 or something like that when we had this conversation last. So a lot of Montreal fans that were in the chat were really disappointed with the start to the season. And then the trade just happened as well. And I know that you and I talked about it, and we said Kamal Miller for Duke and Lassiter was a clear win for Inter Miami. However, I mean, Miller is fitting in very well at Inter Miami, and Inter Miami was also 1-6, and they're now 4-6. And Montreal, after the trade, was 1-6, and they're also 4-6. So they're on a 3-game win streak. Duke is fitting in like a glove. Lassiter looks like a good role player as well. Did you see this turnaround coming from Montreal? And how much confidence are they playing with right now to go into a game against Toronto, potentially get some type of, I don't know if you call it an upset, but get a result that could potentially send them to a semifinal?
Look, I think what I'd say of this is I think that my feelings on the trade doesn't change because, again, I still think Montreal gave away the best assets. But what I did say at the time is that I do like what I see from Duke, and the acquisition made sense. So I think it's been not that surprising to see him do well. And I think also just the thing we've kind of forgotten is that Montreal had depth at center back. That was also something we mentioned. We mentioned that moving Miller isn't a bad idea, it's just we're more shocked at the return. So it's not surprising that the Montreal defense hasn't changed much. Jonathan Sirois has done well. The big thing that's really changed is they're getting guys healthy. I think that's just been as simple as that. Like, look, last game, Romel Kyoto had missed a couple games. He comes back, scores one, gets in helps create another off the bench. That's been a huge addition. Just, getting some midfield health back, some legs again in that area of the field. And finally, thanks to that and the schedule slowing down a bit, they've been able to really finally gel a bit under Hernan Losada. So I think it was just something where early on in the season, it was a mix of they weren't fully adapting to the Losada system. Losada also as well wasn't maybe putting his players into positions that had fully suited them. But now that they've got guys healthy and they've kind of figured out, okay, maybe Mathieu Choinière is our best option midfield. Okay, maybe Bryce Duke is fitting in. Oh, we figured out kind of how to play with Chinonso Afor up front. They've kind of answered a lot of those questions themselves. So I can't say and sit here and thinking, okay, I'd expect them to go on this sort of run, but I do think it's something where we looked at the factors at the time. It's not surprising that they were due. I think they were due at a certain point to go the other way, and I think it's it's fitting. Now all of a sudden they head into this game, they are quietly, no one's talking about it, ahead of Toronto FC in the standings. So we saw that coming a few weeks ago.
I think it's a good point, and there's a lot I want to touch on too. I don't want to keep. I just feel like there's a lot of points. We're just gonna keep going back and forth, but I think this is a very fascinating topic because going off of what Ryan is saying here, Miami won the trade, and I would still say I agree with that. But Duke is shining. Lassiter is quietly performing beyond expectations. But I agree. I just think after the trade, and like Alex said, with injuries, and then all of a sudden Mathieu Choinière, who I think could be well on his way to a Canadian men's national team call up, the pieces just seem to click. But it's great because this is a team that last year obviously finished second place. We're used to seeing a very good Montreal side in the past 12 or so months. So the start was very concerning, but I like the way that these new additions have slid into the team. And I remember, and I don't remember who it was, or else I would give them credit, but it was an analyst who covers Major League Soccer, and I can't remember who it was, but he basically said a little bit of the same was what Ryan said there. He said, on paper, Miami won this, and I don't think there's much of a debate, but they said, watch out for Duke. If this trade is ever going to lean in a way where it could, look to be maybe even or even a little bit potentially Montreal's way, it's going to be because Duke is going to potentially change the game. He is a game changer, hasn't quite had that opportunity at Inter, but if he can slide in there, I mean, he took the number 10 kit, which Alex and I love numbers, but he's been a perfect fit, and I'd really like to see the way that this team is turning around. So, I mean, now let's flip that over to TFC right now, and like you said, quietly surpassed TFC in the standings. The pressure's on Toronto, right, Alex? There's no getting around that. What do you think Toronto has to do here to be able to get past Montreal? Because one team is definitely heading in an upward direction, and I would say TFC just been kind of floating so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a rough time for Toronto. I think it's something where really, other than that win last week at home, over New York City, where they really looked their most complete and best all season, something's looked off, especially in recent weeks. Like, Michael Bradley's been out of the lineup, and maybe once again we've underestimated his what he brings to the team. And I'd say, yeah, that's fair, but also again, him, Coelho, it just no matter who it is, the number 6 issues have kind of been a battle for a long part of this season. But yeah, they're just something that's not clicking in the attack, and I think that's the bigger thing, because I think we knew the defensive issues were there since day one, and they've gone away in spurts, but also for the most part they've reared their ugly head in games when teams attack it. But for Insigne, for Bernadeschi, and now you got CJ Spong in that mix, it just feels like they're not clicking at their full offensive potential. And that's worrying, because this is an old team that was kind of built around the fact that they've got really good attacking midfielders, fullbacks, and forwards. So when they're not clicking, the defense, the defense is hanging on, especially in the midfield. So it's something where, yeah, the home team in this game, a team where they're sliding in MLS play, they're now below Montreal. They're, all the teams below them have made coaching changes. I generally think this is a game where if they lose with Montreal coming in and grabs a win, I think Bob Bradley might be done. Like, I think not even might be. Like, I feel like he's done. Like, I genuinely think he's done. So the pressure is 1,000% on TFC. Like, you have all these top players. Your squad is an average age of 30. Like, you can't even use the excuse of, this is a young team. We're still gelling. We're still figuring out, and you paid all this money for Insigne, who's 31 now. Like, you're not, banking on some 22-year-old South American star, and maybe it takes a while to find his legs like a Thiago Almada did over Atlanta. No, this is Insigne. Like, this is a guy you need, you want to win with now. So there's a lot of factors where TFC, this is such a massive game for them. And it's unfortunate for them in the sense that they would have loved this game in the semi or the final, but this is a must-win game very early on.
I just saw in the chat. I didn't want anyone to get there before I did. But yeah, you're talking about Bob Bradley, which I didn't know you were going to go in that direction. But Greg Vanney, Alex, looking like, I don't know if it's official, but it looks like he could potentially face the sack. I don't want to speculate, so don't take any of my words for it. This is pure speculation. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. There's going to be a lot of pressure on. Where's Armin? There's that comment. Yeah, Greg Vanney might be heading out to LA Galaxy. I don't know if I would like to see that return. I mean, I'm up in the air.
Because I think it's something where I mean, if all parties are, for it, Greg Vanney's good at putting structure. Like, really, his only downfall at LA, I feel like, is off the field. Like, their supporters are literally actively boycotting games. Like, they want their sporting director out. Like, I feel like there it's off the field issues, because when the Galaxy were at their best last year, like, they were fun to watch. Like, Vanney has this way of getting teams to gel, and you just look at the pieces Toronto has. 100%, I think he could get a little more out of him, at least, than what we've seen from Bradley. I think maybe some tweaks would be required. I think Vanney does demand a little more of some of his players physically, and Toronto's older roster might need a bit of a rejig. But look, it's something, if both parties were open to it, I think Vanney would 100% be a fit back at Toronto. I think it's something where he just kind of left because he wanted a new challenge. TFC was kind of going through a rebuild. His old club came calling, but I don't think the blood is too bad between them, I'd imagine.
No, I don't think so, too. We'll have to wait and see. But we'll skip over to the last one before then. We'll just kind of dive into comments from now on, guys. So get your question in. But the last one we haven't touched on quite yet is York and Vancouver. And I really like this question because of the rules of the Canadian Championship, I'd like to get Alex's thoughts. But which Canadians will Vancouver play? So, Alex, obviously, I mean, in Major League Soccer, they don't have a lot of Canadians that start. So give me like 3 to 5 players that you think could potentially have a good chance to start. I mean, I'm assuming you're going to put Hasal in net, but is Yao in that situation? I mean, is Russ coming back in? What Canadians think could potentially start for Vancouver? And will that hurt them? And will that hurt them? That's the question.
Well, I'll throw a whole list at you. Why not?
Good.
They started zero. They started 0 on Saturday in the MLS play, and we asked about it because I was at the game and I asked. So I'm like, curious. Randy Sartini, interesting enough, said that was for rest purposes. Because of that, I think Ali Ahmed's a must, because he should have started on Saturday personally. So that's a big boost. I think he's someone where he's shown that he genuinely helps the first team. I think Hasal will also start, which I think is fair because he's been solid this year. It's been unlucky because the 2 games he started were Real España away in the Champions League, LAFC away in the Champions League. And the first game they had a B team and he had to face a lot of chances. And then the second time, he had to deal with Dennis Bouanga and Carlos Vela, for 80 minutes. So I think it's something where Hasal will be more than up to task against York. He certainly will do a job. Ahmed's another one. And I think from there, I personally would put Reiner Poso, and I think that would be a good 3. There's your 3 there. Don't worry about it. I do wonder if Russell Teibert would come on. There would be a bit more of a question mark because he hasn't played much this year. And this is really, it feels like something where Russell Teibert in past years was maybe, kind of at the level, not saying he would really come in and change things, but he was at the level. But when he came on against Minnesota, this was one of the real first times where he was genuinely struggling. He literally, the first goal that Minnesota scored, Russell Teibert was just in a zone by himself. So if he does start against York, that could be a bit of a question mark just because Vancouver's been good in midfield this year. And, the only times where they haven't really looked like that, it's been the 2 games, San Jose away and Minnesota at home, where Teibert came off the bench. So that's something to watch there because I have a feeling he will start. And otherwise, for some fun names, I'd love to see Yao. May as well. He played for the second team this weekend. He looks, like he's been growing into his role. If not, there's 2 fun ones I'd love to see. Either Levante Johnson, who's been tearing up MLS Next Pro, or the fun one, because why not? You should call him up, and he's young. He used to play in the CPL, so he knows the ropes. Antoine Coupland. This kid has just been lighting up MLS Next Pro. Has a goal or 2 goals, if I'm not mistaken, a bunch of assists. Every game he's getting 3 to 5 key passes, just dominating the MLS Next Pro level despite being one of the youngest players on the team. reward him with the call up, give him a look, because he feels like a profile that the first team could use long term.
Yeah, you're talking about the old guard with Russ, but I agree. I think an opportunity to potentially get some of the younger guys in. I would really like to see Karifa Yao, because you and I have talked pretty highly about him. I know how excited you were because you thought that Montreal was just going to bring him back on loan and he was going to stay there. But you were surprised that the Whitecaps were able to get him, but obviously hasn't featured in the fact that you just said, like, in their last MLS match, there's 0 Canadians that started. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. Yeah, Coupland, the Atletico Ottawa legend, young man, went over to Europe, had a brief spell there, but it's good to see that he's getting his feet back. And, these are what the opportunities are for young Canadians in a tournament like this, to potentially get that type of opportunity. But we will have to wait and see. I'm very intrigued in a lot of these matchups. I love the Montreal-Toronto game. I think that's probably the matchup of the quarterfinals. Obviously, the two MLS teams going head to head. But I honestly think another, like, a toe-to-toe match would be that Forge Atletico Ottawa one. And the other ones, again, if you don't think so?
I mean, it's something where I'd agree with you because it's a finals rematch. But, given how Forge won that final last year, and you just look at Ottawa's form, like,
yeah,
why the Pacific game wasn't just rough, because it's one thing if Pacific's a good team. Like, it'd be one thing if Pacific came and ran them over, but it just feels like Ottawa didn't offer them much resistance either. Like, it was Pacific were literally bullying Ottawa's defenders off the ball in their own half. Like, they were dancing. That goal Ayman Salouf scored. And, like, you're looking at Forge. Like, Forge will have seen the tape from that, is going to be like, oh, these guys are struggling. Let's go out. Like, Forge is – that's the funny thing about Forge tactically. They're a team that watches film and sees lineups, that identifies weaknesses, and will go after. And it feels like Ottawa right now, the way they're playing, there's weaknesses, there's struggles. So Forge is going to highlight that. And I just think because of that, I mean, look, it's something where the can champ matches in past years between CPL teams, like, I swear 80% of the time the team no one expects to win wins. Like, remember last year when York had no business beating Pacific and they did? Like, that's just what happened. But I feel like Forge is a team that doesn't really fall into that sort of trap.
That's fair. I mean, again, it's a cup competition. You never know. But, I mean, usually Atletico Ottawa's admin is in here, so he's been a little quiet this stream. So, I mean, he usually comes in here pretty confident. But it is very surprising knowing how good and consistent I thought Atletico Ottawa were last season. I mean, obviously they had some big names that left the club. What so far? What do you put it down to? Why Ottawa's been struggling so much? Is it the fact that the big players that were expected to come in, like a Sam Salter, just hasn't quite lived up to it? I know there's a lot of pressure on him. Is the tactics been tweaked enough for you to maybe cause some concern? What is it? Because this is very, I don't know the word is. It's a very disheartening start to the season for Atletico Ottawa, a team that many expected to probably still be top 3.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for you, I led off with what was wrong with Ottawa in my weekly CPL, high press roundup. So
check it out.
It's fresh on my mind. It hasn't dropped yet, but we'll be out soon. But no, I think Ottawa, the fascinating thing for me, I think, is the defense. Like, their defense is kind of fallen off a cliff. And I think even beyond the specific game, because before the specific game, they'd only allowed 3 goals in 3 games, if I'm not mistaken, which is not bad. But it's just, you look at the goals they gave up in each game, they've just been so cheap. Like, I think Halifax, how'd they give up that goal? It was a turnover in midfield, and then they just got cooked in transition. That's not an Ottawa goal to give up. Against, when they went to Valor, a wide ball coming in and scoring. That's not an Ottawa goal to give up. Against York, yes, the free kick was phenomenal, but if you watch the lead up to it, terrible turnover, and then they just, it was a cheap foul to give away. That's not an Ottawa. You don't give up those sorts of chances if you're Ottawa. They never gave up those sorts of chances last year. And then Pacific, 2 of them were turnovers. One of them was a set piece where you allowed a guy to deliver a ball right onto the line to an unmarked defender. And then the 4th one, they just got ran through, right? Like, it's something where their defense has just been off. And I think the offense has been at a similar level, if not slightly worse. But last year, their offense wasn't great, but their defense was so good, they'd only need a goal, and then they'd win. And so far in every game they've played, they've scored a goal, or except for York, they've scored a goal on most games, except last year the difference is they win or tie most of those games. And so far they lost a 1-0 to York that they probably would have won last year. They lose 4-1 to Pacific. I think that's a game maybe where they get a 1-1 draw last year just because their defense wouldn't be that shambolic. So I think it's something where I don't know if it's the pressure of the offense not improving and the defense is just finally wearing out after all they did last year, but it just feels like the defense has fallen off a cliff and the offense hasn't gone up enough to overcome that.
I would tend to agree. I am curious though to hear, just get very simple. You don't have to give reasoning, but you can if you want. Who do you think out of the departures that Ottawa had last year, who do you think they missed the most right now? I'm assuming because the way you're talking, you're going to go to the back line, but is there, or, who is it? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the back line, but it's pretty much the same. I think it's something, they've missed maybe Tissot and Hayworth a bit because they haven't played in recent games as they dealt with Knox, but I just think it's something, if anything, the biggest miss is Sissoko from last year. I want to say it was, I forget what his first name was, but the midfielder they have, because it just feels like their midfield balance has been really off. And I think that's been the big factor because Ollie Bassett's playing a lot deeper this year. And also they're not getting as much of a defensive shield in front of them. Because I think it's something where, look, Tableau is a big loss, but I feel like Gianni Dos Santos has shown I've been very excited by what I've seen, even despite the maybe not getting as many goals or assists yet. Like, he gets into such good positions. I just think it's something where there's something off in their midfield. And I just feel like Noah Verhoeven's been a very good ad on the ball, but off the ball, they're missing something with Sissoko gone. I want to say, is it Abdoulaye Sissoko that they had last year, the number 6 who played a lot of games for them? They really missed him.
Yeah, I've liked what I've seen so far from Dos Santos as well. I think he's a creative player. He's a different in a way to Tableau, but I saw an answer here from Ryan. Is Tableau is one of the right answers, but I don't know.
I mean, I'd add Brian Wright. I think that Brian Wright, just because Sam Salter, he's a different type of striker. He wants to go into space. He wants the ball at his feet in space, whereas Brian Wright could hold up. He could muck it out a bit, and that opened up space for your Tablas and your Bassetts. Whereas a guy like Salter, when he started, hasn't been able to open up that space for Dos Santos, for Bassett, and Malcolm Shaw has done a better job of it, and they've looked better with Shaw up front. So I think Wright is also another loss that to add to that.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of pressure on Salter. I know that the One Soccer crew just did a segment on that, and the pressure is gonna eventually start to build because if Ottawa want to turn this around, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of different issues going on in this squad, but I mean, you expect someone who kind of has that pressure on him to come in after coming over from Halifax. Salter's expected to score goals. He had a very good season last year, and he's gonna have to figure out a way to do it sooner rather than later. But let's move along now to back to the Rovers. I saw a couple, and we're hopefully gonna have a nice little segment over there. So yeah, in the finals, it would be a nice one. But Alex, so taking a look at the Pacific and Rovers matchup. Now, I don't want to give anything away because I don't know exactly who we're going to interview, but hopefully we're going to get a nice little interview from one of the TSS Rovers players. But I know we talked about it not being like they're playing with house money, but those players specifically, how many of them do you think in the back of their minds are like, this is an audition? This is an opportunity to do something in a tournament like this that can maybe get my name looked at the CPL level next season. Do you think that goes into any potential storylines that could happen? Some big moments. I mean, we know we saw it in the last match as well, but if it was me, I'm just picturing playing a type of matchup like this where it's like a lot of eyes will be on me. If I do something special and I make them not forget, maybe there's something in the future that could maybe come away, or am I just overthinking it?
I think it's true. I think it's fair. Like what I loved about talking to the Rovers ahead of the first game, they were as appreciative of the chance to play this game, but they saw it as an opportunity. Like there was something, and I loved that the whole club, like this wasn't just the players. Of course, the players, they're not dumb. They're going to be like, look, I'm going to play on TV. I'm going to be playing, in front of a crowd. People are going to be watching us. We have a chance to be a cup set. But I loved was that you ask anyone at the Rovers, coaches, staff, they're like, this is great for our players. We want them to be seen and to be sold on. Like it's something where the mentality is there. So I think that will certainly be on the back of their minds. And I think what's huge is they saw the attention they got after beating Valor. They saw people like we're talking about them. Heck, you look, say Vaughan. They went to Montreal. They impressed, right? What happens? Valor loses every center back. It feels like on their roster. They needed a center back. They went and signed Cladicella from Vaughan. But literally a week after he played in that game, he's starting for Valor. I think it's something where there's a few CPL teams that have some holes to fill across their rosters. Injuries are going to happen. You look at, say, a team like York and the injuries they've struggled with. Cavalry, especially because they love looking at League One players. A couple of these Rovers players have actually trialed for Cavalry in the past, funnily enough. I think it's something where if they play well, opportunities are going to open up in the summer, and they'll be like, okay, we want to put ourselves in the shop window so that if a team needs a left winger, they should look at us. If they need a left back, if they need a center back, if they need a midfielder, a goalkeeper, that the options are there. So 100% they should recognize that, especially seeing the attention that was brought up after the first round and a story like Chella's.
That's what I was gonna say. The attention is you're gonna drum it up when you have that type of opportunity. But looking at just the scenes, and I know that like you were there, it was just such a beautiful story, and I would love to see some of these players get rewarded from it. But this is obviously a more difficult test. I would say in a way, just because obviously like they're the away side, they got to travel, and Pacific is a very good. Not that Valor's not, but Pacific are a very good CPL team. They had the route pretty much planned from the beginning to the finals. So I do agree, and we're gonna jump on that a little bit here with Barca Boy saying that Pacific FC have the best chance of the CPL teams. And you and I were actually just having that debate whether it was them or Forge. And I know in the first stream we talked about Pacific having the easier route, and I still think that's true. But over this past weekend, obviously, I would say that was a statement win from Pacific. I don't know how other word you would maybe want to describe it, but what did you notice after this weekend that the performance Pacific put in that would maybe give you even more confidence that they will go in here and do business as usual and head on to a semifinal?
Yeah, I think everything's lined up for Pacific. I think something where all 4 CPL games this year, they've performed well. I think that for the most part, they've arguably been, on the front foot in all 4 games and been the better team for large portions of those games. And then in the Canadian Championship as well. And they showed good resilience, good grit. They have the cup experience. And I think the big kicker as well that's going to help them a lot is depth. What's wild about them beating Ottawa is that, technically, I mean, a guy like Eamon Salouf is probably going to start a lot of games now. But, heading into the year, a guy like Salouf wasn't technically first choice, right? Like, you look at some of these guys, like Pacific won a game 4-1 and got all those goals. Easton Ongaro didn't start. Adonai Jareed didn't start. He's looked good every time he's been on the pitch. Kakuta Mane wasn't even in the squad. He's someone who, once he gets up to full speed, he looks like he could be a player. Like, it's something where just that depth is going to be a huge difference for them, because you add in the easier schedule. Like, they're going to be able to go full blow on this competition, but also still focus on CPL play. And I think that's something that some CPL teams have struggled with, is that balance of, say York last year, they made a great run to the semifinals. It decimated their CPL season with injuries and all that. And I think Pacific has shown so far with the deep roster they have, as long as Manny Aparicio stays healthy, of course, that they can tackle all these games. All of them are at home as well, which is a huge boost. Like, there's just so many factors lining up in Pacific's favor that would that I could easily see them going to the final. Because, like, if they say they win this Rovers game, like, you'd back them against the Whitecaps at home. It's something where just they look comfortable at that stadium, and they'd certainly you'd back them against York at home, and then from there you're in a final, anything can happen. So yeah, Pacific 100% has the best draw of the CPL teams and arguably the best draw of this tournament.
Now I agree with everything you say, and I'm gonna and I don't want to pick on this player, but I agree. I mean, I'm looking at this back line of Pacific. I think it's one of the best back lines in the league. I like the depth. I like the fact that, like you said, they scored 4 goals away without Easton. Gazdov, for me, so far, and again, he's very young. This is a big step up to try to replace a keeper like Callum Irving. But I mean, looking at the way that they lost against Forge, I don't know if you thought any different. I didn't love Bassett's goal. I mean, it seemed like a good hit, but it just seemed to me like someone he could have saved. I'm not a keeper, so I don't love judging keepers, but just given his start of the season, and again, I'm hoping he can grow into it, because I do think that he's a very talented kid. But do you think that could be a concern when it gets to a match like potentially the Whitecaps or maybe a TFC or Montreal in the finals, maybe having a shaky keeper, if you wanted to put it that? Maybe I'm being too hard, but just the only negative thing I could say so far about that start for Pacific is that there's been a couple goals that and one of them obviously decided a match. So what was your thoughts there? Or do you think I'm worrying about nothing?
I think it's a fair worry to have, and I think now it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, because so far the response has been Gazdov, and I think that's been, it's fair. I think it's Pacific rate him, and it's something where they're letting him work out these errors. It's just a question of where's that threshold, because I think it's something where he's going to learn from these mistakes. I think the one in the first game wasn't so bad. It was just something where it's a bit unlucky the way he clawed it into his own goal. Certainly the one against Forge was one where, yes, that was a rough mistake. That's a save you should be making. Certainly this Ottawa one as well, although, he was screened, which is something where he still should have saved it, but screens do play a big role in how a goalkeeper judges a shot. But now I think it's going to be interesting to see how Merriman reacts, because Gazdov has full faith in the team. They've said that. Merriman's certainly shown that. Now this is a chance to be, okay, I'm young, but I'll let that just forget. I'll have a short-term memory. Or if they start to add up, then you get worried, because that's the one thing with young players. Things can snowball. They can snowball for good reasons. Like how many young players come on, they have a great game, and then just like you can't touch them. Like they're playing out of their minds and they go. But also a young player can come in and struggle, and it can sink them. Maybe we've also seen countless players. So I think for the most part, it hasn't appeared to sink him. I think, he's shown a good ability to bounce back within games. Like there's been games where what I liked about his mistakes in these 3 games is that he made big stops after. But I think it's something where now he has to have a game where he has no mistakes to show, okay, it's not bothering him. It's not something where another one goes in. Fans are questioning you. It's going to get to you, right? It's going to get to you at a certain point. And I think this Rovers game is going to be, this Rovers game and maybe the next York game are going to be key indicators, because if Basket comes in for this Rover game, that's a huge sign, because it's okay. Like this is a Rovers game where in theory you shouldn't be facing many shots. Pacific's defense is one of the best in the league. So if you trust Gazdov in that game, fair enough. And then of course this York game on the weekend, because this is an opportunity for him to bounce back. So huge games ahead for Gazdov. I think it's something where at this young age, they're obviously comfortable working through these kinks, but how he responds is going to be the big thing.
I agree. When you're young keeper, there's pressure being a keeper regardless. But when you're young and you're replacing someone like Irving, like it's very difficult to do. And I agree with you in terms of the threshold, because I like, despite him not having the best start to the season, the trust is there. And as a young player, and I mean, I've played in situations, and just going back to my experience, and when you make a mistake, it's in the back of your head, and you're like, did I lose the manager's trust? Am I replaceable that easy? So just to give him a little bit of time, and he's had some good moments, I think he'll hopefully grow. And it's for a young player, man. It's tough, because if you think in the back of your mind, all right, I'm done. Like after that, another goal I let in like that, I'm done. I just think it's hard to build that confidence back up. But if you can fight through it, like you said, maybe get a little bit of a run of form, there's a good opportunity. I think that this kid could hopefully just kind of lock it down and move on, because this specific team is dangerous. And I think that they are going to potentially be in for a big season. But I really think if they want to take that next step, go on and make a run in the playoffs, go on and make a run in this tournament, the goalkeeper is going to have to be a little bit better than what he is so far. But I agree with Ryan, give Gazdov time, and I think that we will. But Ryan, you did also say this, and I don't think this would be the case, but I'm going to throw it over to Alex as well. If York beat Vancouver, should the Whitecaps fire Vanny? Now, I think that'd be a little too harsh. I don't mind the start so far for the Whitecaps. Obviously, I believe right now, Alex, they're sitting in 7th place in MLS. They had not the best start to the season. They were obviously in the CONCACAF Champions League, but I mean, this is a bracket. I would say the Whitecaps should have an opportunity to go to the final, maybe win it again. I don't know. I think it'd be a tough look to lose to York, but I don't know. I'm torn. I would say no. I don't think they would, and I don't think that they should fire Vanny if they lose to York. But I'm curious to see where your head would be with that, because it would be quite the upset.
Yeah, I don't know whether they would or not. I think it's something maybe it could, but I don't think it would be fully wise, just based on the sense that, look, yes, the Whitecaps are 7th, but what's hurt them so much is just like, it's funny as it says, it's luck, because their underlying numbers are very strong. Like it's something where, again, I think they're still top 5 in MLS for like expected goals for, and like top 7 for expected goals against. They've been attacking and defending at an elite level, yet they've just had some unlucky goals against them. Like look this weekend against Minnesota, like that first own goal they had to break their shutout streak. And also just in front of goal, Brian White and Pedro Vite and Ryan Gall, just for whatever reason, have struggled to score some of these chances. I think it's something where statistically, if they keep playing like this, they're going to do very well over the course of a season. I think it's something where if you fire a manager at that point, it would be harsh. So I think Based on that, it's something where, yes, if you lose to York, it would be a huge upset. It would suck because this is a competition you're favored to win. You're the defending champions. And because of that, I could see him fired from that perspective. But it's just, if I just think because of the numbers, because of the fact that it's his last year of the contract, they finally got a full, healthy best 11. Like, it's something where you just see out the end of the year, and then at the end of the year, his contract's done. You can reevaluate. You have a free chance to hit the reset button. I think they've done enough in MLS play, despite the results, because again, it's something where generally the numbers and performances have been borderline elite. That should, at least if I were making the decision, buy time until till the end of the year.
Yeah, the contract situation makes a lot of sense. And honestly, like you said, at the end of the day, who's gonna come in and turn the ship around in the matter of time? It would be a tough pill to swallow. But unfortunately, Whitecaps fans, they have been bounced out in this tournament and in pretty poor circumstances before, but they are the defending champs. So I don't, even if they lose, which, I mean, we're gonna go through predictions next, Alex. Even if they lose, I would agree. I don't think anything would happen to Vanny. But if you guys are just joining us in the stream, guys, drop a like and get your predictions in, because I did see very early on in the chat, and I'm assuming, I didn't ask this question yet, but I'm assuming these are your predictions. I think you got Vancouver FC in there, but I'm going to assume that's the Whitecaps. So, Alex, it's time for the fun part. We're going to go through and give our predictions and why. So everyone in the chat, just like this gentleman did here, just in a row, let us know your predictions, and we'll try to discuss them. But we'll start with the first quarterfinal match. Actually, I don't know if it's the first quarterfinal match. It's the first quarterfinal match on the screen here. It's the match you're going to. I think you're only going to that one, obviously, right, Alex?
Yeah, unfortunately, all three of the other ones are all in the GTA.
In the GTA. Okay, so we'll start with one you're going to. So who do you got? I guess I'll start. I'll throw it to you. I don't want to. Tell me who you think, but then also give me some hope as to why maybe the Rovers can do it. But I'm going to go with Pacific. I do think this will be closer. I don't think this is going to be like a 3-0. I think it's going to be a tough like 2-1 type of performance. I think there's just when you have a team out there that's playing with house money, I just think something can happen, and the Cups are like that. They've already upset one CPL team. Maybe if there's, again, not to pick on them, but maybe there's a mistake in Gazdov or who's ever in net. You never know what could happen, but I do think Pacific will take it. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a good matchup. I think, Alex, you will enjoy it live, but I'm going to say 2-1 Pacific going through.
Yeah, I think it's something where my final prediction would probably be like 2-0 Pacific, 2-1 Pacific as well. I just think it's something where Pacific is, they've shown to be that good. Maybe the goalkeeping, situation catches up to them, but even then they've been so good defensively where they haven't allowed more than a goal in a game. And for the most part, like, had they not had those goalkeeping errors, you could argue that they should have 0 goals conceded this year, because really all three they've only conceded 3 this year, and all 3 of them have been errors, right? Like 1 own goal, 1 punched into your net, and 1 you miss. Like, they've been so good defensively. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for Rovers. Whereas you saw with Valor, there was holes there in that armor defensively. Especially a guy like Matthew Chandler. Obviously, it sucks to see him out for the year, but he struggled in that game, right? And Rovers did well to identify some of those potential weaknesses. It's just we haven't seen those weaknesses there with Pacific in the defense. So yeah, I think it's something where Pacific should get the job done. But what I will say for the Rovers, they have a chance just because this field's a bit narrower at Pacific. I think it's something where teams have said how it just feels like there's a couple inches just lost on each side. And the Rovers, what they showed against Valor is that they're going to be incredibly disciplined and they're going to take their chances. As we saw, as I just said, I don't know how many chances they'll get, so that's a question to be had. But with how they defended against Valor, if they defend like that on the narrower pitch, maybe limiting space for Pacific, who, to be fair, before this Ottawa game and against Ottawa, they didn't have to deal it because they scored so early. They've struggled to beat low blocks this year. If Rovers can get organized in a low block, be disciplined, I'd still struggle to see a path to win an open play unless it's a 1-0, but maybe they can get the game to penalties, and from there, I certainly back them. I bet they'd be practicing penalties this week in anticipation of such a scenario. So that, if you want, because you said you wanted an avenue for them to potentially win that, I think them in a low block could frustrate Pacific.
That's fair. But just before we move on as well, because we talked about the back line of Pacific, and Is the best defensive duo in the CPL so far? Would you argue it's someone else? Are you going Meyer and Didic? Because I've been really really impressed with those two. Aerial presence as well. I mean, even if a low block can sometimes frustrate Pacific, I would argue that if they get the right opportunity from maybe a corner kick, free kick, having those bodies in the boxes as well, and we've seen Didic do it before. They're just two defenders I wouldn't want to go up against. Like if you're Rovers, are you nervous if those two start looking at them being like, crap, like this is going to be difficult?
Yeah, I feel like they have to. Yeah, surely they look like the best duo so far. Again, like I mentioned, like they just don't give up anything. They just win so much in the air, and for the most part, do so well in that regard. So, because really, it's other than whoever starts for Forge. Like I don't know what would Forge's best pair be. Like I guess James and Matutsala, James and Achinoti Janssen.
I was gonna say Janssen. I'd probably go Janssen James, which is a great pair. Like don't get me wrong,
Yeah, I mean, I'd put them certainly they're in a discussion, but I just think Didic and Meyer Jagir, given they've had that full season together, they've just seemed to grow each game, which is scary. Like I think it's something where they probably are the best defensive duo in the league, which is a huge boost for Pacific.
Yep, and I mean, like I said, they can figure out. I mean, Gazov can figure out his game a little bit. I just think they'll just take that extra step. But we'll move on now. This one's it's another intriguing matchup: York versus Vancouver. Obviously, a lot of pressure is going to be on Vancouver. I do think it's going to be close still, but I kind of liked your 2-0 prediction in the last one, so I'm going to steal it. I'm going to say it's going to be gritty. I'm going to say like kind of like a 0-0 first half, and then Vancouver will eventually break them down 2-0. I just don't think there's enough from this York side from what I've seen so far to be able to put, unless again like a bit of a magic somehow, and then they try to just defend for the rest of the match. But other than that, I just think eventually Vancouver will break them down, and it'll be a relatively comfortable 2-0 game. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to go 1-1 and Vancouver wins on penalties.
Oh,
and I just say that. I just say that because random fact, Josh, this one's a fun one for my.
Let's go.
Vancouver's never outright beat a CPL team on the road. They've only played Cavalry and Pacific, but each time Cavalry twice, Pacific once. They've drawn or lost each of those games. And also they haven't won a road Canadian Championship game. And this includes Pacific, Cavalry, CF Montreal, Toronto FC, and FC Edmonton from back in the USL days, I'll add. And also maybe Ottawa as well. Actually, the Ottawa Fury. They haven't won a Canadian Championship road game since 2015, if I'm not mistaken, or 2014. So just historically, they struggle on the road in this competition. And they showed it last year when they went away to Calgary. It was a nervy, if you remember correctly, it was a 1-1 game where Bevan scored that worldie against his former team. And Eric Godoy rescued a bit at the 86th minute to send it to penalties. I think it's something where Vancouver makes it close in the end, but once it's in penalties, I just think they'd have the superior takers and would take it in the end.
I like that Alex came to play with those stats today. So soft clap. I love it. I love the logic. It's hard to argue with. I will still say, just to make it interesting, because I think it'd be I'm thinking it's gonna be very intriguing now, Alex, if this one does end in a draw and goes to penalties. But the only argument I would say to even just go on what I said, I guess, is just I'd be more looking so at this York side. But I mean, you went over a lot of different teams. But just again, I don't know. This York side for me was, and I put my hand up, and I've done it before. I've talked very highly around this side, but maybe it's one of those things where there's too many changes too soon. There's been injuries as well, but I did still really like where the direction York was going. I thought they were going to be in for a pretty surprising season, pretty good season. And so far I've been wrong, and I've watched every single match from them so far, and I've just been really disappointed. I don't really know how else to put it. I
mean, what I'll say for York is what I'd give them a shot at in this game is that personally, from what I've seen of them, they looked at their best when they get behind the ball. Because I think what killed them against Valor is they got too open, and Valor just torched them in transition because they got the speed. And then, ditto, what was the next York game? Why can't I remember who they played? But York Ottawa, for example, in that game, York did well because they sat behind the ball a bit more. They were a bit more off the ball, I think. So I think York's not going to be dumb. They're not going to be like, look, it's Whitecaps. Whitecaps have always been good in transition and have struggled to break down low blocks. if York can sit behind the ball, they've looked a lot better there this season than when they let the game open up. So if they can keep the game slow and compact, that's where they'll give the Whitecaps some trouble, because the Whitecaps really have shown this year that they struggle to break down a low block.
Could frustrate them a bit as well. And as the game goes on, and like you said, mentally, I mean, if Russ is playing, he's been through some of those matches. It could get to maybe some of these players, but no, I don't know. It'll be interesting. But I'm gonna be really intrigued now, because that was a great stat you brought up, Alex. So I'm curious. I mean, if you're a betting man, there you go. There's a nice little bet provided to you by Alex. But now let's move on to Forge versus Atletico Ottawa. One of the probably the hottest team in the CPL versus probably the least informed side. Forge is technically the home side.
Yeah, I'm not messing around with this one. I'll just start 2-0. I'd say just 2-0 Forge.
2-0.
I think Ottawa, I mean, if this is last year's Ottawa, I'd back them to go in and frustrate and get a road result. They're usually so good on the road. But if I'm predicting, I just haven't seen glimpses of that this year. Even when they went on the road, because they've only played once on the road this year, when they went on the road to Valor, like they didn't show that convincing Ottawa, defensive spine for all of that game either. So I just think because of that, if I'm making a prediction, I think 2-0 Forge and they move on comfortably to the next round.
Yeah, the chat all agrees. I was going to say 2-0, but I'm like, I said that for the York game, and you just said it, so I'll say 3-1. I mean, I think Atletico Ottawa could find a goal, maybe a nice like Bassett free kick or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of evidence right now pointing that Ottawa will get something from this. I think Forge really want this competition as well. I think, again, if you're talking about a CPL team that will eventually, at one day, whether it's this season or the next or the following, go on and win this competition, you're probably looking at Forge, maybe Pacific. So I think that they want this, and I think that it'll be business as usual as well. But let's move on to the final one, and I think this is – I'm very curious to see what you're going to say. I will start because I already know my answer. I'm going to stick to it. TFC, CF Montreal, I think we can all argue probably the most pressure. And let me know, guys, in the chat right now. I'll put them all on screen. Let me know your predictions, because this is a tough one, I think, for some of you guys. I've seen a few answers already, but I just didn't put them all on the screen. But let me know who you think and why. I'm gonna go with CF Montreal. I think the most pressure to win this whole tournament is on TFC. I think Bob Bradley desperately needs to pick up this victory. But if I'm just going off of the fact of form, and really I kind of wrote off CF Montreal when they were 1-0-6 to start this season. But I see a rejuvenated side. I see a side going into this with more confidence than TFC is. And I mean, when we've seen TFC have poor tournaments in the Canadian Championship, it usually correlates with kind of having a poor season in MLS. Now, obviously, like Alex said, sneakily, Montreal just got in front of TFC. Now, that doesn't mean anything, but I just like what I'm seeing so far. I like the way that Duke is settling in. They're finding their system. Matthew Chouanier is playing fantastic right now. Herrera, I really like the way he's settled in. He's kind of taken over Alistair Johnson's spot on that right wing-back position. It just kind of seems like this team is finally settling down. The mold is forming. Sean Rea as well. I like that. I just saw a 2-0 Sean Rea brace. I'm going to say 1-0. I'm going to say 1-0 Montreal. I think it's going to be close. Even though I'm going to say 1-0 Montreal. 1-0 Montreal. I think it's going to be close, but I just see the wheels maybe turning a little bit. The pressure's on TFC, and I don't know. I wouldn't call it a cup set, but I just like what I'm seeing right now with Montreal, and I think that they could do it. Am I crazy?
No, I think it's something where I'm really torn on this, because I'm flip-flopping between both teams, because there's a lot of numbers that I'm weighing. I think on one side, the pressure of TFC, it doesn't help. I think also what's important to consider is they've got injuries. Like Jonathan Osorio has kind of been Mr. Can champ over the years, and he looks doubtful for this game because he's missed the last few with a knock. That's one less Canadian you can put in, right? And, frees up a Canadian spot elsewhere. I mean, I think they should still be fine with Canadians, because I guess they'd probably go like Richie Larea, K, and either you go like an Akinol up front, or you throw in like a Franklin at left back. Like, it shouldn't be an issue for Canadians, but I think you'd love one of them to be Osorio, right? So him potentially missing out would be a huge loss. On the flip side, Montreal's in great form, but Montreal struggled on the road this year. The only road win they've had is SKC away, and for the most part, everyone's beating SKC. Although they naturally beat Seattle on the road yesterday, because MLS, right? You can never predict that darn league. So Montreal has struggled on the road. But then the last thing I'm weighing in is, funnily enough, when Toronto and Montreal have played each other over the last, like, I want to say 4 to 5 Canadian championships, the team in worst form always win. It makes no sense. Like last year, Toronto was struggling. Montreal was doing great. Toronto blew the doors off them 4-0, right? And then in 2021,
that was the
they met
final. But the TFC, they had a brutal year that year, right? Because that was the
both
one that was
teams
in.
had a brutal year. Both teams did. So that one was a bit of an outlier, I guess.
Yeah.
But then 2019, I don't know if you remember, that was the year TFC made the final in MLS Cup. Montreal missed the playoffs. And I remember because I was at BMO for that one. Montreal beat them on penalties that year.
Yeah.
So it's just something where it feels like when one team's good and the other team's bad, the bad team always wins. And right now they're pretty much tied, so it's hard to say a difference. But in terms of form, TFC's been the one on the downward slope and Montreal's been on the upward. So I feel like it would be very fitting of these two to have Toronto win. So I think purely because of all that and because you said Montreal, and I'd honestly agree with you. But to be different, I'll say Toronto 2-1 because all those factors I outlined. I just think it's funny how this competition works between them. Plus, they're at home. I'll go Toronto 2-1.
No, I like that. I mean, to switch it up, it's nice, and I do agree because I mean, I honestly didn't even think back to the 2019 one, but you're absolutely right in terms of that form. I personally thought about the final, and I believe in the 2021, and maybe I'm off a little bit. I think that was a season that Montreal finished one outside of playoffs. It was kind of like the Wilfred Nancy like trial season. So it wasn't a terrible season, but I believe they finished just outside. That was a horrible season for Toronto. They did not they did not deserve to win that final. They didn't win the final. And they got nothing out of that season, which is kind of why I was like, you know what? Montreal deserved that back then. But then, like you said, last year, Toronto again, brutal season. And out of nowhere, Akinola has the brace. I'm just looking it up right now on the phone, and yeah. So it's fair. I don't think you can go wrong either way. I am seeing in the comments a decent split. I kind of think a few more are going maybe a touch Montreal, but it's pretty close, and I think it is going to be close. I think it's going to be a really, really good matchup. I don't even know what I don't know. I'm curious to see if Montreal do cause the upset, what's going to be the fallout after that, because I would argue, I mean, Alex, you can let me know if you agree, but like if TFC wins, I don't think any massive pressure falls on Montreal because they're away. They started the season so poorly. They're recovering a bit. There's some good vibes going around. Maybe this would dampen it a little bit. But if Montreal goes to Toronto in the quarterfinals, bounces them out of the cup, and they're struggling in the league, do you not think just that added pressure could maybe, the straw that breaks the camel's back with Bob Bradley, or no? Am I getting a little too dramatic there?
I think he's done. I think if you lose to Montreal at home in a cup, like it's something where look, like as wild as it says, because I mean things move so quick, but the way things are trending, you're not going up, you're going down. Your team's old and is feeling its age. You're dealing with injuries. Not only are you losing games, but the games you lose, you just don't look like you're particularly close to the other team, right? Like it just feels like there's been a lack of spirit in some of these games. Like I just feel like it's something where all that adds up, and then you're out of basically your best chance to win a trophy. Although I guess the League's Cup exists, I think it's something where Bob Bradley is probably done.
I don't know. It's gonna be intriguing. A lot of storylines here. It is a really, really fun competition, guys. And if you want to watch it, it's available on One Soccer. Be sure to subscribe. That is all the time we're going to have on the stream today. We gave our predictions. Alex and I basically went 3 the same, and then the last one, which I think is going to be it's probably the match of this quarterfinals, and it's going to be a good one. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it from wherever you're watching from. If you're going to the match, hopefully you can, because that's how we support this sport in this country. I'm gonna try to get out to one as well. But yeah, guys, appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to drop a like on the way out. Alex, I appreciate your time as always. And we will maybe do something we're gonna definitely do this similar stream for the semifinals, and maybe we'll do something after the quarterfinals as well. We will see. But thank you guys so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers, friends.